somebody. Good. So we are starting with Tanya. Tonight is a special night. It is the holiday, the Hasidic holiday of redemption of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, we call the Rebbe Rayatz, who was incarcerated in Russia in 1927 with the threat of taking away his life, which was obviously in those days not a threat. It was just like a sort of fact of life for millions of people in that time, in that country, and with enormous miracles on many, many levels, he was not sentenced to life. They said, okay, we're just going to give you 10 years of hard labor, which of course would have been de facto life. And then that was commuted to 3 years of exile. And then when he went for his 3 years of exile, 1 week into his 3-year exile, he was told he had absolute freedom. And that was on the 12th of Tammuz, which was today. And since the 12th of Tammuz that year was a Soviet holiday, he got the release papers the next day on the 13th, which is wonderful because we got a 2-day holiday out of it. And today is also the 12th of Tammuz is the birthday of the Rebbe Rayatz. So it's his birthday, it's his redemption. Tonight is literally both energies, the redemption of the 12th, the redemption of the 13th. This is like an amazing time. So this is an exciting class. And we're going to start, of course, by learning Tanya. And then afterwards, we will share miracles and then have some thought. I had this very cool thought that's sort of like dancing around in the back of my head. I don't know if I express it, it'll sound like completely like an articulated, done thought because it's still developing, but I'll share it after our class. All right, so there's reason to wait. You might be interested, or you might say, what are you talking about? Okay, but it's just something I just found out yesterday, so I think it's really cool. All right, we are in chapter 20 of Tanya. We are toward the end of chapter 20 of Tanya, actually. And when we are looking at chapter 20 to review, someone yesterday said that, why do I always spend so long reviewing? And I'm like, if I don't spend so long reviewing, how am I supposed to remember it a week later? But if you feel I spend too long reviewing, you can privately let me know. Maybe I'll make it shorter. I just feel like, how are you supposed to remember you don't review? So we have an overarching question. And our overarching question is, now that I know that I have this enormously powerful love inside of me, I'd love to use her. I love to always feel alive and loving and passionate in my relationship to God. But how do I feel this on a regular basis? To understand that, we want to understand the unity of God. And somehow when we really understand the unity of God, this will help us understand how I can use this love every single day. So what does it mean, the unity of God? So what we've so far understood the unity of God means is there is only God. There is nothing but God. And the fact that it looks like there's a lot of stuff in creation, it's all insubstantial. It all doesn't impact God at all. It has no true substance. That's why God keeps recreating it. How does he create it? By saying it into existence. Because all of creation is actually words. This is a configuration of God's words. As is this, as is this, as is everything, as is planet Earth, as is the whole Milky Way galaxy system, as is all of the spiritual worlds. It's all God's words. And God keeps saying those words again and again and again. Because if he stopped, done, finished. So then the Rebbe said, and therefore it has no substance to him. It's just his words. And we spent a long time last week saying, does a word really impact you? You are finite. So let's look at finite you and a word you say. Well, what's one word compared to your ability to speak? Nothing. And let's take it a step further, step back. What's one word compared to your ability to think, from which came the ability to speak, from which came the word? Even more, nothing. And what's one word compared to the powers of your soul, from which came the ability to think, from which came the ability to speak, from which came the word? Absolutely nothing. Exactly. And that's you, and you're finite. So imagine what that is to God, who's infinite. Now, I told you last week we ended exactly at this point. The Rebbe is going to, as if, repeat everything he just said one more time. But he's adding 2 steps of the process to even more separate the word from the speaker. Let's read it and we'll see, if you're listening closely, the steps, 2 more steps the Rebbe adds in the same chain of what's one word to the speaker. So we are on page 26, Chavav, and we are 2, 4, 6, 8 lines from the bottom. L'mashal, for example. So now that I told you it conceptually, I'm not going to give you an example. But in the example, I'm actually going to extend it even more. When it falls into someone, a certain love, a certain desire, something in their heart, before it goes from the heart to the mind, to think about it. At this point, it's not yet conscious thought. Well, at this point, we can't say it's lettered, meaning we said last week, there's a word. A word obviously is from letters. The word, the power of speech, comes from the power of thought. And we said, well, that makes sense because there are letters in thought also. The letters of thought are more refined, more spiritualized than the letters of speech, but we think in words. We think in language based on the richness or paltriness of your vocabulary base. That's going to determine the extent of your thoughts. So we think in language. Thoughts are conscious words. But there's something that comes before conscious thought. And that's what we will call our subconscious thought. And subconscious thought doesn't have words. It's before the formation of words, which means it's creating another whole layer between that word and me, or that word and God. It's just a simple desire. It's a wordless desire in your heart for that thing, whatever that thing is. Here, that thing happens to be creation. That's pleasing to you. And how much more so before it came into your heart, a desire for it. So it was just, there was an awareness of this. Again, this is on the level of subconscious. There was a subconscious, it wasn't a conscious thought. It was a subconscious awareness of this. You were aware of this thing. It's a really cool, wonderful, amazing thing. To get it. Like you're aware of something, but you haven't yet emotionally connected. And then you emotionally connect. And then you think about it. Keep going. For example, maybe you're on a higher level and you're thinking about learning something. Or maybe you're on a more basic animal-like level and your desires are into awesome food. Only afterwards, that this subconscious, wordless awareness enters into your heart. So from that subconscious, sorry. I'm sorry, just listen. And then it goes back up to your brain to think about it. Now in words, consciously. What are you thinking about? It's a conscious thought. What do you think you're thinking about? How to get it. How to take that desire and actualize it. To get the food. To learn this wisdom, that's what's intriguing you. At this point of conscious thought, now we're thinking in words. There's letters. What I mean literally language. We think in language. that people speak in language and people think in language. Kol inyane ha'olam, all matters of the world. We speak in language, we think in language, and God creates in language. With that, we finish the chapter. What did we just add? Just 1 second. Someone keeps calling. Just 1 second. Sorry. What does this mean? We just created last week these 4 steps between the word getting back to us. There's my word, which originates in my power of speech, which originates in my power of thought, which originates in the 10 powers of my soul. And then behind all that is me. So does this word impact my power of speech when I speak it? No, you can speak limitlessly. You're not going to run out of words. Does this word impact my power of thought? No, your power of thought is already spiritualized, just words of thought. It's not all like the physical words. Does it impact the 10 soul powers? There's not even words in the 10 soul powers. It's that far removed. Does it impact me, the speaker? Of course not. Look how many steps there are between us. What the Rebbe just did is he added 2 more steps. You see, in lieu of a blackboard, we have fingers. He added 2 more steps. What were the 2 steps he added? He said, between here and here, there are 2 steps. Remember, the word originating from my power of speech, which originates from my power of thought. The Rebbe says, what's triggering your power of thought to think? Something going on in your heart. What triggered your heart to have a connection to this thing? Something going on in your subconscious, which originated from the powers of the soul, which originated from you. So it's not between the word and me 3 steps. It's between the word and me 5. The word comes from the power of speech, which comes from the power of conscious thought, which is coming from the desires of my heart connecting me to whatever this is, which is being elicited by my subconscious awareness. The awareness, then I have an emotional response, then I have a conscious thought, which creates from my power of speech a word. And then there's the soul powers that allow all these things to happen, and then there's me. So between me, the speaker, and the word, I've got power of words, power of speech, power of conscious thought, emotional connection in my heart, subconscious, 1, 2, and then soul powers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 stages that separate the word from the speaker. I hope my fingers made it very clear. Which means, the Rebbe is saying, look how remote for you, a finite human being, how those words aren't affecting you. 6 stages removed from you. And now, if we think about God, obviously his speech doesn't affect him. So this world happens to be his speech. And actually this galaxy happens to be his speech. And actually everything in the physical reality happens to be his speech. And actually all of the spiritual realities are also his speech. But we just said, look how remote the speech is from me. So look how much more of the words are remote from God. So even though all of this seems very substantial to us, seems big, seems powerful, it seems to be intimidating, it seems to be in a certain sense opposing God, it's all as insubstantial to him as a word is to us. And with that, we finish the chapter. Any questions on any of this? Feel free to ask, feel free to set it up as a chat. Feel free to chat me privately if you want to ask a question, but don't want your name associated with it. Any of those are good options.
Does that mean we're nothing?
Does that mean we are nothing? That's an excellent question. So in a different way, asked this question last week, and I explained that the fact that we're a word doesn't mean we are nothing, because as Firma said, she came from the opposite end and said that a word does have substance. It can be substantial. We're not saying a word's not substantial. We're saying a word doesn't add to or take away from the speaker, because the word is so nothing compared to the speaker of the word. The word itself can have substance. You know, some words are very powerful words that resonate. The Gettysburg Address, you know, the words live on. But the word doesn't add or change the one that spoke those words. So the reason why God created in words, we said last week to answer Firmo's question coming from the other end, but in essence, the same question, that God chose to create in words and not in thoughts, because if he created from his thoughts, we would be insubstantial. But since he created from words, we are substantial, but we're still a total extension of him. Meaning he had, like, so to speak, three choices. Create with his thoughts, create with his speech, create with his words. That's his words. Create with his actions, thought, speech, or action. We have those three arenas of choice because he has those arenas of choice. And we said if he created with his thought, creation would have no real substance. If he created with his action, creation would have real substance, but it will be separate from God. So God chose the perfect balance, as always, creating with his speech, where there is a substance. Words have a substance. They have a reality, but the reality is only an extension of the speaker. So we have reality, but we have no reality outside of God's reality. We don't have a separate existence, but within God's reality, we have existence. Any other questions? We just finished the chapter. Any other questions on it? All right. I hope that always means everything's perfectly clear and not like I can't even bother to ask a question. So now we're going to begin chapter 21. Now, I said to you that chapter 20, 21, and 22 are one unit, meaning we opened up chapter 20 with our question. I have this enormous reservoir of love buried deep in my soul. How do I access it? And we said through understanding the concept of the unity of God, we will understand how to access it. And I said it's going to take 3 chapters to understand that concept. Enough to answer our question. 20, 21, 22. So we just finished 20, then we just 21 and 22. And by then we will know enough about the unity of God to understand how we can naturally access this love. What we're going to be doing in chapter 21 and 22 is continuing our theme of speech. Why are we spending so much time talking about talking? Because God creates in speech. And because this whole premise of the world's non-existence or existence only as part of God's existence is very much tied in to the world being God's speech. So in a certain preliminary level, we understand it. And we would just spend a whole chapter on it. So now we're going to go a little more in detail. So we're beginning now chapter 21. But by the way, in case we forgot, even though we've been using speech, speech, God speech, God speech, God speech, God's speech isn't my speech. Meaning, we all do this. We make something like anthropomorphic. We think of ourselves, and well, God is just a lot bigger, a lot more holy, a lot more powerful. But I speak, and God, in his way, speaks. In a sense, yes. And in a sense, absolutely not. Because obviously, God's not a human. And the limitations of a human have nothing to do with God. So therefore, now that's a generally true concept. Now we're going to apply it to this concept of speech. God's speech, which is what we're talking about, versus my speech, which is how I'm understanding God's speech. Sha'adam, that a person, kishemedaber dibor, when he speaks, hare hevel hadibor shebepiv, the breath of speech in his mouth, hu murgash v'nira, it's tangible. Davar b'fnei atzmo, as something independent, something separate. Muvdal misharsho, separate from its source. Shein eser b'chinos hanefesh, which are the 10 powers of the soul, which, as we explained in chapter 20, and we just spoke about at length, is the source of the source of the source, the real antecedent of this ability to speak. But that's only by humans, but by God. His speech is, God forbid, not separate from him. Because nothing's separate for him. And no place is separate from him. So therefore, God forbid, God's speech is not our speech. So what did we just establish here? We established a very simple point that we're saying very strongly, because we want to make sure we get it. In chapter 20, to understand the unity of God, to understand how everything is God and there's nothing but God and there's nothing outside God's reality, we said, let's understand what creation is. It's insubstantial. It's speech. What's a word? That's what we spent a long time saying. Now the Rebbe says, to understand this a little more clearly, even though we say God speaks, and he does, there's a fundamental difference between God's speech and mine. Now, there are obviously many differences between God's speech and mine. I mean, God's not speaking with the tongue, the lips, larynx, palate, there are many details that are different. But the Rebbe is saying there's a very fundamental difference, which is very relevant to our conversation. What is a very relevant difference the Rebbe highlighted? Meaning there are myriads of differences, but this is the essence difference. By a human, once we speak, the words are no longer ours. They leave us. They have a life of their own. I mentioned the Gettysburg Address, right? So Lincoln's long gone, but his words live on, as do many other people in many other famous speeches that I didn't have to memorize. That one I did. I'm sure we all know this famous concept in terms of gossip, right? There's a famous story packaged in different ways of a woman that was gossiping and really hurt someone and felt so horrible. And she went to the rabbi and she said, what can I do? What can I do? And he said, take this huge feather blanket, feather pillow, go to the center of town and just cut it open with a knife, slash it down. She's like, oh, okay. Takes this big, huge blanket, pillow, slashes it down. All the feathers fly all over. She goes back to the rabbi. He says, okay, now gather them all up. She says, gather them all up. He said, you want to atone for gossip? Once you said those words, they're gone. So we all understand this. This is human. This is normal. We don't have to be philosophers or theologians. Once we speak, our words can be very separate from us, but never by God. God's words never leave him. He says them, as we're soon going to explain what do we mean he says them. But for now, we'll just say that. He says them. But even as he says them and they emerge from him, they're always tied to him. There's never a separate reality of the words from the speaker, God, fundamentally different from us and our conception of speech, which is we speak and then the words can have a life of their own. Now, why are we saying God's words never leave him? Well, because that's the point, as we're saying, because nothing leaves him, because nothing is separate from him, because no space is outside of his reality. So obviously, if nothing is outside of his reality, his speech isn't outside of his reality either. So therefore, the Rebbe said, we're using the word speech, and it's very important to use the word speech to understand this concept. It's a very big anchor for us. But don't get confused, because if you think of God's speech like yours, but bigger, you're going to make a fundamental mistake, because you're going to envision the words as now having a life of their own. So God spoke, and my pen came into being. But now it just exists, because, hey, he spoke. Now it exists, separate, outside of his reality. Nothing is outside of his reality. This is a subtle mistake. This mistake could be made even by the forces of holiness, meaning not just confused people, but even higher spiritual forces can make this mistake. If you will, we could say chapter 21 is looking at the mistaken impression creations of godliness have on creation as speech. And chapter 22 is the mistaken impression creations of klipa, creations of, we'll use the term evil, of the force that is covered over its godly energy have on being creations of speech. So everyone's wrong, but creations of godliness are wrong in a more subtle way on understanding their existence vis-a-vis the model of speech. And chapter 22, creations of impurity have a far bigger mistake in understanding their reality vis-a-vis the model of speech. But we don't want to make mistakes. So the Alter Rebbe is laying it out for us. So the Alter Rebbe says, don't make that mistake, which creations of godliness can make, and say, oh yes, speech. In other words, an angel, let's just take it like that, simple concept. So there's an angel. The angel is a creation of godliness. It's godly fire. It's totally aware that it's from the mouth, from the breath of God. But it could conceptualize that as I'm God's energy that emerged from him, but is now not within him. As when one speaks, the words emerge. They come out. They're no longer one with the speaker. My total reality is godly energy. There's nothing of me but godly energy, but it's godly energy that has morphed into this separate entity called an angel. Says, no, that's not the scoop. That's not the story. Why not? Because by God, his speech never leaves him. Why? Because nothing ever leaves him. Any questions on this?
So do malachim actually feel separate, or are they that batal that they feel like they're an extension of?
No, they also have a sense of separation. That's the challenge of all of creation. On more and more and more subtle levels. Obviously, the angel's vision of separation is far more subtle than mine. Because by me, I could forget that all I am is godly energy. Right? I could think I'm me. I could think I'm human. I could think I'm physical. I could have thoughts and desires that are contrary to God's will. So my vision of self is miles away as versus the angels. My vision of self is more like God created me, but now I'm me. That's not what the angel's thinking. The angels is a much, much more subtle mistake. The angel is more like I'm an extension of God's energy. My only reality is an extension of God's energy, but that extension of energy was spoken, which means it emerged from God, which means there's a slight separation. There's a slight I to that energy. But all I am is God. All I am is an existence from the breath of God, as versus us, that we might have other thoughts in understanding our own existence, other challenges. So I have a challenge to be aware, to not get fooled by the illusions, and to be aware that all I am is God's energy. And the angel also has that challenge, but his challenge is on a much more subtle level than mine.
So they also have to get past it?
Yes. But in a much, much more subtle way that
or is it fine if they just stay like that? They don't have to work on it, they're fine like that.
They don't have an ability to work. An angel has no ability to work. An angel is stationary. Angels can't move. So angels can't work on themselves. But we can work on ourselves. We're the ones that can work on ourselves, only humans. So when we work on ourselves, we infuse higher energy to all of the upper worlds as well, which can also shift things by the angels. The angel on its own can't work on it. The angel on its own can't move, can't shift, can't come to a true understanding. Doesn't have any of those abilities. It can't move. It's an angel. It could be very godly and far holier than us, but it's just as you could say a computer is smarter than a person. That's not a true sentence. A computer is not smarter than a person. A computer can be programmed to process certain information faster than we can, more efficiently, more effectively, but a computer's not smart. It's a creation, it's a tool. So similarly, an angel's a tool. Angel's a creation. It doesn't have any ability to shift, not itself and not anything else. So can anything shift the angel? Yes, the Jew can shift the angel. When the Jew is working on him or herself, that infusion of energy affects everything. All the lower worlds, this world, all the higher worlds. And therefore everything changes. So when we have the complete revelation of Mashiach, everything in all creation will have an awareness of self as an absolute, seamless, fused extension of God's energy. Also this scrap of paper and also that angel. Who shifted them? In essence, we did. I mean, God finished off the work for us, but in essence, we did by our work. Any other questions? Any other thoughts on any of this?
So this whole process we're going through now, when Mashiach comes, we're just going to get it like
that. When Mashiach comes, so we're saying here that right now we all grapple with the illusion of separation. Every single one of us struggles with that illusion. Again, this piece of paper also, so to speak, struggles with the illusion, but the piece of paper can't do anything because it's a piece of paper. But this piece of paper also has an illusion of separation from God, as does my pen, as do I. But I, as a human being, can struggle and do something about it, can come work on myself and come closer and closer and closer towards a completely contra-instinctive perspective that I'm an extension of God's energy. When we have the complete revelation of Mashiach, that contra-intuitive, completely is not how my brain processes, will be the natural state for all of creation. For all Jews, for all non-Jews, for all pieces of paper, for all animals, for all angels. On every strata, it will be the obvious reality that our existence is some energy of God's existence with no barriers and nothing in between. We will experience this on every level of self. We'll experience it on our soul. We'll experience it in our body. Our body will cry out and realize its reality is God. So there's a very interesting point that I think I shared a few weeks ago. I think it was Shavuos that I learned this. And it really affected me very deeply, and I know I shared it afterwards, but that was a few weeks ago. That Lubavitcher Rebbe explains that when we have the complete, exactly this point that Esther's questioning, that when we have the complete revelation of Mashiach, and all of existence, boom, knows what it is, extension of God's energy. Now, of course, it might not be as boom as that because there could be stages within Mashiach's reality. But when we come to that stage, it will be boom. It will be just an instant shift on every strata, on every level, the angels and the pieces of paper and us and the non-Jews and all of the worlds. So the Rebbe explains that for all of creation, from the highest angels to the earth, that awareness will cause a tremendous nullification of self. What is my reality? It's just an extension of God's energy. But for the Jew, it will be very different because we're not a different morphing of God's energy. The Jew is a piece of God. So the same way the paper understands its existence is an extension of energy of God, the Jew, body and soul, is going to understand my reality. I'm from God. I'm from the very essence, energy of God. So the paper and the angel and the non-Jew and the earth will all have this automatic nullification of self. And for the Jew, it's going to be a deep, deep awareness of self, what we really, really, really are. And that's what's going to be about Mashiach. So we're discussing here in chapter 21. We finished chapter 20. And what we're going through is to understand the unity of God, creation as speech, in order to understand how creation in no way changes God, in order to understand there is only God, in order to somehow from this understand how we can on a daily basis access the enormous love for God we all have submerged inside of ourselves. Now, what we established so far in this chapter is, by the way, we're talking about speech, speech, speech. Don't think of yourself when you're talking about God's speech. Fundamental difference. What's the difference? By me, my words do live on outside of me. By God, there's nothing outside of him. So his words are not outside of him. He spoke them, they emerged, but they stayed connected to him. So now we're going to, so to speak, prove that concept. This concept I'm trying to prove is that God's speech is fundamentally different than mine. As we said, so therefore we understand that God's speech is, God forbid, not like mine. Just like his thoughts are not like my thoughts. And I can give you a quote to prove that one. As is written, God says, my thoughts are not like your thoughts. And it's written, my ways are not your ways. My ways are much higher than your ways. So in essence, the Rebbe wants to prove to you that God's speech is not our speech. But the Rebbe can't make up a verse. He could, we'd be fooled, but he's not going to do that. He's honest. There is no verse that says, my speech is not your speech. So what he's doing is taking two verses and putting them together to sort of create that concept. There's a verse that says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. There's a verse that says, my ways are not your ways. So the Rebbe is sort of saying, just as we know that God's thoughts are not our thoughts, just as we know that God's ways, like his action is not our ways, so too the level in the middle, his speech is also not like our speech. So that was a parenthetical thing. It's looking inside, you see it's literally in parentheses of like proving the Alter Rebbe's point that even though I speak and God speaks, and I use the word speak for me and I use the word speak for him, but that fundamental difference, which is very critical to understanding our issue, by me, I speak and they're outside of me. By God, he speaks and it never leaves him.
So why isn't there a pasuk about that too?
Because there isn't. There are many psukim that aren't, and you have to derive from what is to what isn't written. So that's not written, but therefore the Rebbe says, I'm going to pull two other verses together from which you can derive this piece in the middle. Thought is not, action is not, so the one in the middle, speech, is also not. You know, a lot of times when you study the Torah, if you're studying with the most foundational commentator, which is Rashi, who's explaining the literal meaning, so very often we have a verse, and Rashi will say like, it's written here this, and it's written here that, and then you have this long Rashi to explain why we need to repeat this verse twice, because here's written like this, and here's written like this, and here it covers this, and here's this, massive, long, complicated, brain-twisting Rashis. And when you're reading them, you're like, God, you could have done this so much simpler. Well, let me help you. If you just wrote it like this, we wouldn't need this whole Rashi. And God says, oh, thanks, but I'm God. Or to put it in other words, all of the Torah is Shemoisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Nachmanides' introduction to the Torah. he explains that every word of Torah is God's names. Meaning when we read, if you would read the scriptures, if you would read the 5 books, you could read them, lots of very clear English translations, you can understand. You could read it with some commentary. There's loads of English commentaries, all authentic Torah true commentaries. You understand. You're understanding a very superficial level. It's true. But there's deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until you get to that core, which is, this is the names of God. You know, nowadays they have this concept called cracking the codes of the Torah. I don't know if any of you ever like watched a video on this or nowadays seen it on Zoom. But they're able, by taking the Torah and putting it in the computer and, you know, figuring all this out, they see all these levels of codes embedded in the Torah. Because it's not just the most brilliant thought. It's far deeper than that. It's God's names. So we can never ask on a verse, well, God, why don't you just write it like this? Because it's not merely that. It's something much, much deeper. But we're supposed to use our mind to understand Torah. And therefore, like in this situation, the verse I need doesn't exist, but this verse exists, and this verse exists, so I can put it together and understand it. Any other questions?
Is it possible to say that we should understand the power of speech ourselves? Like, even though our speech is not like God's speech, but our speech has a lot of power. And like that story in the negative, also in the positive, you could build people, you could build worlds, you could change things with words and speech.
You could
So
absolutely
maybe it was left out to just so we have an awareness of
okay,
our.
I see what you're saying. So,
Yes.
Well, in essence, the Rebbe is from a different way, but come to that point also. Yes, we're gonna. That's next chapter. From a different way, what From is saying is maybe God didn't write, and my speech is not like your speech, so we should ascribe or strive for that godlike, positive, creative energy in our speech, just like it is in his. Next chapter,
Yeah, right. That's what I was.
Same thoughts, but in a different way. The Rebbe is going to say, well, but if we do call what God's doing speech, it must share this commonality with human speech. So if human speech is separate, there must be that element in God as well. Let's find it. And that's chapter 22. So there is something along those lines. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I like your spin on it because that's so practical. We're all creations of speech. And guess what? We all have the power to speak. Not only that, that is considered that which makes us most godlike. We're called midaber. I think that's my son who's at the airport, hopefully in New York. So I'm going to take a little commercial break. Please feel free to keep talking. Sorry, it wasn't him. But since I got the same number, I didn't recognize on my cell and on my house phone. I'm like, it could be him. He could have an issue. I'll say after class.
You're known for the fly.
Aisha's traveling or the saga or something like that.
You're known as the flying Turin adventurers.
When Turins travel, there's always stories. So yes, absolutely, absolutely. Anyway, but I really liked from what was saying, because let's look at it positively. I'm a product of speech. I speak, and as I was saying, when we speak of the strata of us, human, how is that strata called in Hebrew? Midaber. Midaber means the one who speaks. So that godlike ability is so significant, it's become our name. As a species, as a race, as mankind, The word in Hebrew isn't mankind. It's the one who speaks. So I think what Firma said is very true, that we have enormous power to build in our speech as God builds and creates in his. And we should always be very cognizant of that power because we can use it and do lots and lots of building with it. That's a great takeaway. Any other thoughts, any other questions on any of this? Okay, so let's continue a little more, a few more minutes. So wait a minute. If God's speech is so different from mine, forget what I told you about chapter 22. If God's speech is so different from mine, that when I speak, the words leave me and live on and are their own reality, and by God, they're never separate from him because nothing's separate from him, why am I calling it speech? Why am I calling what he's doing speech is if his speech and my speech in essence look so different? Besides, of course, all the other details that they're different, but in essence, they also look so different. Why am I calling it speech? Rak al derech mashal. So we use the term speech metaphorically. Let me reanalyze speech. What is the core component of speech? So the Rebbe says, just like with the speech of man below, who megala lashoimim. What is speech? As I think we actually mentioned this last week. He reveals to the listeners what was concealed, what was submerged in his thoughts. The Rebbe is saying, I think, wait a minute. I speak and the words go on. God speaks and they never leave him. Why am I calling what he's doing speech? I mean, I know he doesn't have a tongue, a lips, a larynx, a palate. I know that. I know he doesn't have a body. I know that. So if I'm calling it speech, it should be like mine in a God version, but it doesn't sound even like mine. Why am I calling it speech? So the Rebbe says, because understand what is the truest definitive quality of speech. Even though your speech and God's speech are so different, because by you it's separate and by him nothing's separate, but in its truest element, your speech and his are similar. Similar enough that we use the same word. What's the truest definition of speech? The Rebbe is saying, you know what speech is? It's taking something that's within yourself and revealing it to an other. Right now, I'm speaking, and hopefully people are listening. So I have thoughts in my mind, thoughts of Chassidus, Tanya, and I'm articulating it in words so you can hear and absorb what's in my thoughts. But if I was just thinking it, you wouldn't know it. So who knows what I think? Me. Who knows what I speak? The one I'm speaking to. The audience, you. So the real definition of speech, the Alter Rebbe says, is revelation to another, which would mean the real definition of thought is revelation to self. Speech is a process of other-bound revelation. Thought is a process of inward revelation. So as I said, I think last week when I touched on this concept, that if you talk to yourself, which is fine and normal, don't worry. Nowadays, no one would know. You're talking to yourself. What you're doing is thinking out loud. You're not talking. Because speech can't be to self. Speech, by definition, means to something outside of you. So if I talk to myself, what I'm doing is I'm thinking out loud, which helps me and clarifies it, and I think better if I articulate it so I hear my thoughts. But I'm just taking my thoughts and verbalizing them. I'm not speaking. Because speaking means to something else. That is the essence, real point of speech. Communication to something else, not to yourself. Communicating to yourself, that's thought. Communicating to someone else, that's speech. And that's what God's doing. When God creates, creation is a process of outward bound revelation of self. Who is the other that's receiving God's words? Creation. So there's God and there's creation. And the revelation of self that creates creation is the revelation of self to creation. And since there's, again, this sense, a false sense, but a sense of otherhood, it's called speech. Any questions on that? Okay, so let me read that inside, and then we'll stop at that point. So why are we calling this thing speech? So just as a human, when he speaks, it means he's revealing himself outward to someone else, to his listener. Kach l'mayla, so to above, by God. Ve'ein sof baruch hu, by the infinity of God. Yitzias ha'or v'achayos mimenu yisparech, the emergence of the light, of the life from him outward, me'ahelim elagiloi, from a state of concealment, submerged in self, to a revelation to be expressed outwardly. And what is his outward? Livra oilimos, lachayoisam, a little different than ours, to create and vivify worlds. Nikus b'shem dibor, that's called speech. And those are the 10 utterances, as we discussed before, that God recreated and is constantly recreating the worlds with. The first verse of all of Torah in the beginning, and the 9 times it says in that chapter, and God said. Those are the 10 utterances that God is always saying outward bound to the creation that keeps it existing, and it's speech, because it's to the other called creation. And also, anytime there's a concept of a prophetic spirit, of God talking. God talks in Torah all the time. God talks in the prophets. God talks in the writings. Whenever it's saying he's talking, that's what he's doing. When he's talking, he is expressing energy outward to something that views itself as else, to some form or fashion or creation. That's the other, that's the recipient of this revelation of self. That's God's speech. Which the prophets grasped with the prophetic spirit was God's speech to them, was God's emergence from self, from a covert reality, from something that's not expressed to others, not visible, not apparent, to bring it out, to gift it to, in this case, the prophet. So is a prophet necessarily hearing words? His brain is translating this energy into the words, but he's experiencing this energy from God. And it's speech, because God's taking a piece that's within self and extending it outward to something that feels like an else, which in this case is the prophet. Any questions on that? Okay, very mind-blowing stuff. Very, 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 very fascinating, deep understanding. All the secrets the Alter Rebbe just lays out for us. So we should be able to serve God better. The whole purpose of Tanya is for us to serve God better. A little better service of God, that was the point. All right, so it's the 12th of Tammuz. And we said we wanted to talk, and I wanted to share this cool thing I just found out yesterday. Before I do that, does anyone have anything they would like to share? Any things they would like to thank God for? So I said I wanted to share my what's going on with Maisha. So my wonderfully capable 13-year-old Maisha, so many details. Oh my gosh, how do you consolidate a story? But stories within stories within stories. Had nothing to do for the summer. Summer camp is quite expensive, and I didn't really think he'd make it there based on the amount I was able to pay versus the amount they wanted. But miracle of miracles, thank you very much, God. On Thursday, we found out he's going to camp. So that was very wonderful and very exciting and very happy. And miracles, we pulled together everything he needed for camp in like the blink of an eye and all the paperwork and all that. Fine. So yesterday he's on the plane. Planes, of course, nowadays, anyone that flies knows that planes are crazy. And to get from Chicago to New York, you get a very, as my husband calls it, scenic view of America in the process. So he was getting the scenic tour, which means he was going from Chicago to Nashville to New York. And when he was in Nashville, they said all flights to New York are canceled. Okay, I mean, my husband had a very similar experience when he flew 2 weeks ago. He got a real scenic tour. He got Charlotte and Nashville, so fine. Problem was that this airline, which is the only airline I can fly him on because he's 13 at Southwest, and they do not have relationships with any other airlines. And they did not have any flights available on, this is yesterday, Monday, on Monday night. Nobody's flying Monday night, weather conditions, fine. Tuesday morning, nothing available the entire Tuesday. Wednesday, nothing available the entire Wednesday. The first flight we can put him on is Thursday. And I'm cutting short a lot of time and energy. And I'm like, you're taking a 13-year-old and you're going to keep him in Nashville alone until Thursday? So they agreed that was a little ridiculous. So what they were able to do was fly him back home last night and put him on a plane today. They were going to put him on a plane from O'Hare, which would have been more convenient, but it was a stopover. I said, no, I'm not doing that again. So from Midway to put him on a plane directly to New York. So last night at about midnight, he arrived in Midway, and I had the privilege of driving down and picking him up. And today my husband had the privilege of driving him to Midway to make this flight. And today I was thinking, you know, I have to be very, very grateful to Hashem, because what if the same way their first available seat to New York is Thursday, what if their first available seat to Chicago was Thursday, you know? Or what if they could get him back to Chicago, but their first available seat in Chicago to New York was Thursday? And this poor kid is supposed to go to camp on Tuesday morning. So I was like very grateful to Hashem that there was a flight back to Chicago, and they thought of it and they put him on it, and they were very nice. And there was a direct flight to New York today. So at this moment, hopefully his plane has arrived in New York. I haven't heard otherwise, so I'm assuming all is good. But I still have this major issue. I have to get him to camp. And he's a kid, and every day he's not in camp is like, I mean, he handled it well, but like, come on, like there's only so many days of camp. And this is his first time ever in camp. It's very exciting. And I contacted the camp and I emailed back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the camp said, we have no clue how you're going to get him to camp. We don't know. We don't know anyone going to camp. We have no way of getting him there. This is like in the mountains. You can't take any public transportation, whatever. Anyway, so my very capable, resourceful son that's in New York said, Ma, don't worry, I'll get him to camp. I'm like, okay, good. So I stopped thinking about it. I said, great, my son's going to take care of it, and I'm not, based Tamlas, it's all great. I'm sure it's all going to work out. So I really was not stressed, because I was like, no, he's taking care of it, and it's all going to work, and God's good, and it's a good day, and there's no reason it shouldn't work out. Anyway, just before the class, I'd like to thank Hashem, because just before the class, my son, meaning Avremel, the older one, who took responsibility to get his younger brother to camp, said, you'll never believe what just happened. I'm like, he found a way to get him to camp. He said, I don't even remember the details. I like had to get onto the class, so I was a little pressured for time. He said, I walked into some gathering, I guess in honor of the 12th of Tammuz, and just as I walked in, I overhear somebody saying, oh, tomorrow I need to get my son, I need to drive my son to a school in the Poconos, which my son Avremel right away thought, that school is a 40-minute drive from this camp. That is quite close. But why would this guy volunteer to go 40 minutes out of his way, or perhaps 40 minutes each way to drive my son? So my son approaches him and says, oh, I hear you want to drive your son to the Poconos tomorrow. And he says, oh, would you like to drive him? Like, I'll give you my car. Would you like to drive him? And my son said, well, you know, I want to get my brother to camp. He said, we've got a deal. So it was like just so nice of God. And I'm so grateful that Avremel happened to walk into that gathering, just as this man happened to be talking that he was going to drive his son. And that man happens to know my son and happens to trust him with his car on the crazy roads in the country. Baruch Hashem, I'm very grateful that tomorrow in Mirz Hashem, Maisha is going to camp. So I wanted to thank Hashem for that. That was my thank you, Hashem. Sorry for taking a long time to say that story. Anyone want to add any of their own?
Well, I won't go through any details, but I'll just add to thank God that Hinda's going to camp this summer.
Oh, wow.
I'm not going to go into any of the details.
It would be a longer story than mine.
Probably, but I won't even bother, but I'm just going to say Baruch Hashem. That's what I'm going to say.
Wow, so happy.
Hashem,
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem.
So I
We do that
had,
for our children, so it like very meaningful.
so I had a little something, well, it's not, nothing's a little something really, when there's hashgacha pratis. So, basically, I needed to get an appointment someplace and I called and the person, and I got to know from another appointment, a person in the office and I helped that person, like talking to them for like an hour. And then I could only make an appointment for, towards the middle of July. That's all that was available. Somehow I got a call back yesterday that there's an appointment for me on Thursday. So I think that person, because I helped her and gave her ideas and stuff like that. So she put in a good word for me. So, and you know, and it's really nice when you could be really nice to other people that you've never met up with before and stuff like that, and really, you know, like help them. So I wasn't, you know,
You
I
weren't
was so,
the appointment. You were just doing it because you're a nice person, but it came through.
yeah, no, I was like so surprised when that call came in. So
You know, our,
That
Thank you,
connects- and that
Hashem.
goes back to connect with the Tanya, the power of speech.
Yeah,
and
it's
I
true.
think what our sages say, there is no man that does not have his hour, which means that everyone has an important role to play. And sometimes we look at people and they're like low on the totem pole, so to speak, at least of our existence. And we never should underestimate another person. We should never underestimate how that little person, I mean, for me, for my reality, because like, you know, they're not very important in my world. They don't have much bearing on my world. They could play a pivotal role and really help me. And we should look at every person that way, as like, this person has, everyone has a role to play. Everyone has, I remember once years ago, someone I like vaguely knew, whatever, I'm not going to go into the details of how I knew them, but they were able to majorly help me in a certain thing that I needed done. I needed a certain document, and they were like the only person I knew that could produce. I didn't even realize, someone else told me that they could give me this document, had to do with their line of work. And it was so significant to me. They were so happy to help me. They were so gracious about it. And like this person who was like so like minor in my world, just not minor, not nothing, you know, just some random person I barely knew. So not very significant in my world, not my intimate acquaintance, a relative, a friend, a person, tiny little person in my vision of world, like a little person there, was so significant. So there's no person that doesn't have the ability to help. So you are, as Froma said, using your powers of words, helping. And this person who you barely know, don't know their name, do know their name, was able to really help you.
It was, I was like, I was speechless.
Being that this is Yud Beis Tammuz, I had a Rebbe dream on the Shabbos, between Gimel Tammuz and Yud Beis Tammuz, this last Shabbos. And I thought, being that it's Yud Beis Tammuz, maybe it would be nice to share this dream I had. So I was in the Rebbe's Yechidus room in his office, and the Rebbe was learning from a sefer, very big sefer he was learning. And I was there. There was a small dresser in this room. And I had this very insignificant job to do in this room. And my job was to roll socks and put them in this drawer. That was my job, rolling socks and putting them in the drawer. And at some point, the Rebbe just looked up and smiled and went back to his learning. And that was my dream that I remember of it. But I felt like here we are, the last generation, really just the foot soldiers, the bottom of all of the previous generations. And sometimes we feel our job or what I'm specifically doing seems very, very small or insignificant in the big picture of things. But there's the Rebbe, like, just, it's important to him, the little things that we are doing. And so I just wanted to share that.
That's beautiful. Wow. That's beautiful. That's so, Rebbe dreams are so powerful. I think it's a dream, but it's real. I once, many years ago, my husband had a Rebbe dream. A dream, I don't even remember the details. He perhaps told me them, but I definitely don't remember. But some interaction between the Rebbe and my husband, maybe he was in a Yechidus chamber in the private audience. And the Rebbe told my husband a few things. And one of the things the Rebbe told my husband in his dream was that his son, either that was the only son we had then, or the Rebbe said the name, I don't remember, which is my oldest son, Mendel, should become an expert in the Rebbe's volumes of talks called Likutei Sichos. It's some 30 plus volumes of talks of the Rebbe. And my son at that time was very, very young. Maybe he was 2, like very young. Okay. So fast forward many years. And my son, Mendel, was sharing with his brother, Naphtali, the next son, how he had just completed learning all of the Rebbe's talks in Likutei Sichos. He had made a order for himself, and he went from beginning to end, learned every single one. And so I said, wow, that's what the Rebbe said to Tati. And my son Mendel had no clue. Somehow my son Naphtali knew, but my son Mendel never knew about this dream. So it was just, and then like it came out and we were discussing, it was just amazing that here the Rebbe said this in a dream many years before. My husband never conveyed the message to Mendel. He never told Mendel this dream. Mendel had no awareness of it, but yet the energy was there. And that like motivated him to, on his own, so to speak, decide to do this. And there was the energy coming from, that interaction of my husband with the Rebbe in the dream. It's very powerful. Also, like, I was thinking recently, it's not the same idea, but somehow in my head, it's sort of the same idea. Like when you make a resolution for something, suddenly there's a whole new energy there. I saw this very recently because it's a good thing to talk about on Ukrainian. It was recently my son Beryl's birthday. He just turned 8 a few weeks ago. And of course, on a birthday, you're supposed to take on a good resolution, which means for Beryl, I take on a good resolution for him every year on his birthday. So here was his birthday, and I was thinking, what would be appropriate? What should I take on for him? And I knew, and I realized what I wanted to take on was something that for some reason it's so to speak a small thing, but I was never able to get him to do, which was to say Maida'ani in the morning. The first prayer we say is the Maida'ani. It's an 8-word prayer, and I could never get him to do it. And I've been trying for 8 years. I mean, he just turned 8, so I've been trying for 8 years or so. Let's say a good 6 years I've been trying, and somehow I just cannot get him to say it. He would never repeat it after me. He repeats blessings on the food after me. He says parts of davening after me. He says psukim every day after me, but I can never, ever get him to say Moed Ani. I couldn't get him to do it. And I made that hachlata. I made that resolution on his birthday. He's going to say every day Moed Ani. Whenever you make these resolutions, it's a little scary because it's not a resolution for yourself. It's a resolution for someone else. How am I going to get him to do it? I haven't been able to get him to do it ever, but I'm like, that's what's going to be the resolution. And the weirdest thing, since then, every day, I do the same thing I've been doing for the last 6 years, but somehow it works. And like, I do not believe a day happened yet that he didn't say Moed Ani. And for 6 years, I could never get him to say Moed Ani. I was just thinking, it's like when you take on a resolution, there's a whole new power, a whole new energy that enters in because of the resolution that allows it to happen, that gives it power. So I don't know if anybody else has experienced that when they make the hachlata, when they make the resolution about something, they see they have a power to do this thing that before they never could do. I don't know if anyone had that experience. It's so clear to me because like he never would say it and now he says it no problem. And it was like, boom, exactly a transformation, birthday resolution, done. I don't know if anyone else had that experience, but it was so clear, it was so powerful.
I find that it's very hard to keep resolutions. That's what I find. To be honest.
You don't find that when you make a resolution, you have more power than before. A resolution is just like, oh my gosh, something else on the list. Maybe
it's a commitment. It's very, it's a commitment, but I don't find it's easy. I sometimes find it very, very hard. I don't know, or more doable. I don't know if I find it more doable. I don't know.
Maybe here it was so clear because it was a commitment I was taking on to get Beryl to say it. But I don't remember when, a few years ago when I took on the commitment on his birthday, I took on the commitment for him to say the first paragraph of Shema every day. I was so scared. I was like, I made the commitment, but I was terrified, not because I wouldn't put the time into it, but how am I going to get him to say it? How am I get him to say it? And some days it's more difficult, some days it goes faster, some days it's very stressful, but it happens. So it wasn't, because I guess it's for him, it's not the issue of I'm not going to do it. It's the issue of like, but how do I get him to do it? And that's what I just saw so clearly, that like the resolution just opened up a channel. So maybe for ourselves, it's not as clear because we don't have the fear of like, how am I going to get me to do it? I just have to get me to do it. And then we struggle with ourselves to do it. So maybe that's why here it was so clear, because it's someone else versus for myself. I guess most people don't have to make resolutions for their children, but this is what I do on his birthday, and I'm very grateful to Hashem it's working. Anyway, let me just share this cool thing that I sort of found out yesterday. You might not think it's cool, I don't know, but I was like, wow, this is just very exciting to me. So I was speaking with someone yesterday, and they said, by the way, that the original July 4th, 1776, was on the 17th of Tammuz. I'm like, really? I said, yeah. So I pulled out, my handy brain called Google, and it was, I checked. July 4th, 1776 was the 17th of Tammuz. And that to me was like, wow, connecting to the talk of this week of the Rebbe, Balak of 1991, and also connecting to, also very interesting, there's a letter the Rebbe wrote, I don't remember which president, might have been Bush, but I'm not sure, probably it's Bush, but I don't remember sure. I think he was responding to a letter the president wrote him, acknowledging him coming to America, and his salvation the 28th of Sivan. And the Rebbe wrote a letter back saying, amid other things, that the year he came to America was the year July 4th became a federal holiday. And it was July 4th only became a holiday in 1941. Shortly, actually a few days after the Rebbe came to America, because the Rebbe came to America at the end of Sivan. And a few days later, we have July 4th for the first time, a legal federal holiday. So just to me, whenever I for some reason, I always how my brain goes, like a famous English date, what was the real energy of that day? Because the real energy of that day is a Hebrew date. So obviously every year, July 4th is not the 17th of Tammuz, it's not this year. But the real energy of July 4th, 1776, the founding of America, has to do with the 17th of Tammuz. So what's the 17th of Tammuz? So the Rebbe explains in the talk of this week that the 17th of Tammuz is the energy of something that is good, but you don't see it on the surface. Take a long time to express itself. Because on the surface, on the 17th of Tammuz, there was the destruction of the temple. It was a significant milestone in the destruction of the temple. And that's why for some 1900 plus years, we fasted on the 17th of Tammuz, because it's about destruction. It's sad. But the Rebbe said 17 is the numerical value of the word good. So the 17th of Tammuz is actually a good day. And it says in the prophet Zechariah that in the times of the redemption, the times of Mashiach, all these fast days, there are 4 fast days commemorating the destruction of the temple, will all become holidays. It won't just be like, okay, thank God we don't fast anymore. No, they'll be red letter days. They'll be the biggest holidays in the times of redemption. So why is the 17th of Tammuz going to become a holiday by the redemption? Because in its energy, it's not about destruction, it's about construction. Because in its core, the 17th of Tammuz, what we saw as a step in the destruction of the temple, was a step in the construction of the ultimate temple. And that's why it's numerical value good. And that's why by the times of the redemption, it will be a holiday. Because in its core, it's good. In its core, it's godly. In its core, it's redemption. But we just see the outer veneer. And gradually, as we get closer and closer to the redemption, the outer layers slough away, and we actually can get the inner stuff. Can get the 17th of Tammuz as a day of redemption, which the Rebbe said in our generation, for the first time we saw this with the liberation of the previous Rebbe on the 3rd and 12th of Tammuz, flowing into the 17th. Oh wait, 17th is actually about redemption. So I was thinking, pulling all these like pieces in my brain, I was like, wow, so here it was 1776, July 4th. Now, what Jews were in America in 1776, July 4th? I mean, a few. The bulk of the Jews were probably somewhere in Europe. And whatever they were hearing about what was going on across the sea was like so insignificant, irrelevant, a bunch of goyim killing each other, starting a nation, rebelling, like whatever. Like what does that have to do with us? Who cares? This is no relevance to us. But it is. Because in that tiny little group of people that declared independence, as we commemorated on July 4th, in the core, we saw nothing then, but in the core, that was emerging the United States of America, which developed to become, as the Rebbe calls it, the country of kindness, the country which has the majority of world Jewry, the country that has played a pivotal role in helping Jews all over the world. So when it first happened in 1776, you didn't see anything in the surface. It was whatever, nothing. But it's all of its energy was there in its core, and gradually over time, it emerges. So I was sort of thinking that that's like sort of metaphoric for everything. All the things the Rebbe has told us, all the things the Rebbe has promised us personally, promised us cosmically, all the things written in Torah, they're all true. We just don't always see what's going on under the surface. And that's why we sometimes need patience and trust and patience till it all emerges. I'm going to take I don't know if somebody else has something to add. I'm going to take a break because this might be Maisha this time.
Well, I just want to connect that idea to Yud Beis Tammuz. I think when the Rebbe first was released from Russia, he was broken, and he was not in the best of shape. Even though he came to America, you didn't see then that he was really victorious against the whole communist regime and anti-God and the fight against Judaism. And you didn't see it for many years, but now we see how the Frierdiker Rebbe changed the whole reality of Russia, that there's Judaism alive and strong. And he came here and changed the whole reality here too, which you couldn't see back at the beginning of his coming here. You couldn't see, like, all people saw, like Mrs. Kosovsky Shalom would say, that at that time, everybody believed that Orthodox Judaism was dying. It would end, and that Reformed and conservatives would take over, and that would be the reality. But you couldn't see then the shift. But it is. The shift was that what's real and what's true is Yiddishkeit, and it is, we are winning the war. And he did change the whole reality, and that's part of what we celebrate, I think, for your base Thomas.
Exactly. And that's sort of like, in different words, saying the same thing I was trying to say, just to make it a little clearer. How, like, we don't see. We didn't see it. Anybody there in 1927 would have said, thank God his life was saved, but not, he just destroyed communism. And 60 years later, it emerged that he destroyed communism. You say, when it says that when the Rebbe Yatz came and he said, America is no different, his followers said to him, hairs will grow on my palm before there'll be flourishing Judaism in America. Not a follower that didn't love the Rebbe, a follower that said it because he just wanted to, have him understand. And like, you came here and like, you suffered, you survived the communists, you survived the Nazis, retire. We'll take care of you, retire. Don't fight America. That battle you're not going to win. Hairs are going to grow on my palm before there'll be this flourishing Judaism in America. And the Rebbe Yatz spent 10 years fighting the coldness of America, and he won. Even though, as you said, it wasn't necessarily apparent that he won, but he won, and we see the fruits of it for all these years since. And that sort of to me is the same theme of like, just, we got to trust, and sometimes we have to have patience. We don't want to have patience. We want it now. But if we know we're holding out for something, it's going to happen. Trust and have patience, because it will happen, because God does come through. He could be coming through at this moment. We just, like you're saying with the Rebbe Yatz, he came through. We just didn't have the eyes to see it. But, give it some time, and then everything grows and flourishes, and we realize where it all came from. That stuff that we didn't realize anything was happening there at all. Very true and very relevant for all of our lives. Anyone else?
I was just wondering, like the Palao Sarena this year, is it things that we've seen already? Is it things that we're also still hoping to see? Is it the Geula Shlema Mirz Hashem?
I think we should hold out for the Geula Shlema. I know during the war, there were a lot of miracles. Miracles we know of, miracles we don't know of. A lot of miracles. But I don't want to settle for that. I think we should all say, no, that was nice, that was good, and we know it's going to be Mashiach.
Because I can't.
For Rebbe to say so many years in advance, to give us the heads up in the noon about the year, it's got to be Mashiach.
If it has to be like a lot more.
Yeah, I don't think we should settle.
And today is the best day for it to happen.
Absolutely. Like the Rebbe speaks, it was was on the 5th of Tammuz. So this time of year was the 5th of Tammuz in 1989. And the Rebbe Fabrenyan was talking about, I don't think the Rebbe identifies him by name in the Fabrenyan, but it was Rebbe Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, who said before he passed away that when he passes away, he's not going to go into Gan Eden until God brings Mashiach. That's it. He's going to go on strike. And the Rebbe says, but so he was standing, like so to speak, outside the gates of heaven, not going in. I'm on strike. I'm on the picket line. You got to bring Mashiach. You got to bring redemption. I'm picketing. I'm not walking in. And then there was such a, as the Rebbe says, they gave him some honey cake. There's such a godly energy that came out. He just jumped in like he couldn't hold himself back. There went that one. And then there was another great tzaddik who said the same thing, and the same thing happened. He's like, I'm not, I know he went in. I'm not going in. I'm going to stand outside until God brings redemption. I'm going to picket. I'm going to protest. And then God also like just let some energy of that place emerge and flow out to him. And he couldn't resist the honey cake. He couldn't resist the temptation. He jumped in. The Rebbe says, but if a person takes a vow on the opinion of everyone, it's called adas hakahal. If you make a vow that you're making everyone in the community part of your vow, then you can never nullify it, even if you're given lots of honey cake. So we need to do this, how the Rebbe said it. What we need to do is take a vow that we will not, like, so to speak, enter Gan Eden. We will not allow God not to bring Mashiach. And that was the Fabrenyan. That was actually the last Fabrenyan I was at before I came on Shlichus in 1989. That was the 5th of Tammuz. So I don't think we should settle. I think that's what we could take from those words of the Rebbe. We're not supposed to settle. We're not supposed to say, oh gosh, this was awesome honey cake. We appreciate all the miracles of the war. We're grateful to God for the miracles of the war. We know they were absolute miracles, but we're not settling. We're not compromising. We're not saying we're satisfied with the honey cake. We're not satisfied. We need Mashiach.
Amen.
I'll say amen to that.
You could drink your l'chaim. We can't even see what you're drinking, and you're not driving, sir. You're perfectly safe.
Right. Wasser, mayim, water, whatever you want to call it.
That's what they all say.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. L'chaim. We should see it. We should see it now. And we've done enough. We have done enough. And it's your base Tammuz. And it's just like I was saying about Moshe, you know, his whole situation happened yesterday, which was already your base Tammuz when it happened. In essence, or almost. It's extending into your base Tammuz for sure. And today, and I kept saying, I said, you know what? It's a good day. It's your base Tammuz. It's going to be good. It's all part of God's plot. It's all good because it's your base Tammuz. So I think the same thing. Eibishter, it's your base Tammuz. And we trust you. And like Fruma said, we're folding your socks. We might be doing menial little work, but you appreciate it. You're smiling. You know we're working for you. And we're working to help you achieve your goal. We're working for you to be able to bring Mashiach, for you to be able to reveal yourself as completely, which is the whole idea of Mashiach, the absolute revelation of God for all, within all, now. So we should merit on this very good day, take the energy of the Rebbe Rayatz, the energy of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, birthday of the Rebbe, redemption of the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said by his redemption, it wasn't just personally for him. It was redemption for every Jew. And it wasn't just redemption for the Torah scholars. It wasn't redemption for his adherents, his Hasidim. It was redemption for any person in the world who bears the title Jew. That's how the Rebbe Rayatz said it was redemption for anyone that bears the title Jew. So that means all of us, we're all experiencing now the energy of redemption. So we should see it revealed personally, because we all have lots of redemptions that we need, that we want, that we
Amen.
might not know about, but God knows we need. Every one of our redemptions should flourish, should happen stress-free now, and we should see it for the whole world, because the world's also
Amen.
put in due work.
Amen.
Whatever you wanted, you got it.
I
Okay,
have a
l'chaim, guys, l'chaim.
L'chaim. I have a fabulous picture that it's near my computer. It's with the Frierdiker Rebbe sitting down and the Rebbe standing up and they're holding hands. It's a famous
Beautiful
picture.
picture, yeah.
And I really feel like such a connection with it. And I think one of the trips after we moved here, we bought it in Crown Heights, and I was so like just taken with it. And so it's on the wall here. But many times I look at it, from and it really it's just like so peaceful.
Yes. But part of Beryl's routine, his spiritual routine, I have him in public school. So once I started him in public school, I felt a lot of need to make sure I put a lot of spirituality in his day. And one of the things he does as part of his routine that we call his Hakel, because we started it in a Hakel year, which is next one's 2 years away. Next year, this coming year is the Shemitah, the sabbatical year. And 2 years from now, we're back to the Hakel. So I've been doing this for 5 years. And which makes sense because he's in public school for 5 years. So one of the things we do is he kisses. This is an easy part. He kisses picture of the Rebbe, Reb Simchana, Reb Leivik. And at a certain point, we added him kissing the Rebbe Rayatz. So he kisses, every night the Rebbe, Reb Simchana, Reb Leivik, and the Rebbe Rayatz. And it gives. And I was thinking yesterday, Yovei's Tam was like, I also feel so close. Just thinking every night, giving Beryl the picture of the Rebbe Rayatz to kiss and him kissing it every single night, you feel the connection, you feel the energy. It's special. All the Rebbeim are there for us. They all are.
Does it make a difference that the Rebbe and the Rebbe Rayatz are like the closest to our lifetime?
Probably in a certain way, because there's a sicha from the Rebbe where the Rebbe speaks to the Hasidim that they should still be saying the Rebbe Rayatz's Tehillim. Meaning there's no instruction from the Rebbe for us to say the Alter Rebbe's Tehillim. But there is an instruction from the Rebbe for us to say the Rebbe Rayatz's Tehillim. So that would imply that, yes, there is on a certain level. Again, that's not knocking all of the other Rebbeim, and they're all there for us, and they're all our Rebbeim, and they all pull strings. But there is a certain level there of being so close to us, right? The Rebbe of our Rebbe. So there is that connection.
I mean, my parents, Aleim Hashalom, got married in the English year 1950, and I was born in 1951. So there's like it's
not so far. That generation was part of your parents' lives.
So yep, we need to have a big party already. We need the big party.
Somebody who was once speaking in the high school said, this struck me very deeply. He's talking about, I don't remember why in the context of his talk to the girls he said this, but sometimes someone says something and like, oh, he's so right. Like it felt so right. It really resonated in me. He said the Rebbe Rayatz is an artist and the Rebbe is an engineer. And it just like somehow that like to me so encapsulated like very differing styles of thought and of expression. And the Rebbe Rayatz, if you learn his talks or you read stories about him, there's a lot of emotion, a lot of warmth, I'm not that the Rebbe doesn't have a lot of warmth, but like a lot of like artistic emotion just very embracive, warm emotion for Klal Yisrael, for the Jewish people. And he was the leader at the time of the ultimate suffering, the Holocaust, and the heart of intensity of communist persecution. So it's you know, it's this he felt it. Every Jew suffering, unbelievable, and bore it and contained it, and you know, so definitely there for us.
Wow.
He also writes very, very, very beautifully, like very artistic. His art, his
Exactly.
writing.
Such descriptions, you know, such depth and description.
Exactly. That's the artist. The artist, not with the paintbrush, but with his words.
Yeah, words. Here we are. We're back to words.
Exactly. All works together.
Baruch Hashem. It's beautiful, you know. I'm more in awe every single day, but you know.
So we should see it. Hashem, listen, we made it. We brained on Zoom for you. We want to do it in person, and we would like to do it in Yerushalayim, like to in Jerusalem, and we'd like it to be now. So we're doing our part. We're folding the socks, but you got to take care of the rest.
Yeah, it's so meaningful with your dream, because it's such a connection of everything that's a woman's job. I mean, what does everyone complain about pretty much the most? Even more than making supper, laundry.
That's true. I think I might have been top on that, although it's gotten a lot easier with a lot of people.
Right. So I mean, you know, my kids are always complaining about the laundry, and you know, what years ago when I talked, I shouldn't. It's not Lashon Hara. It's just Lashon how it is. Rifki writes this was always with the laundry, so I always tell her, "Thanks, Rifki, because you got me ready all those years ago for when my kids are going to fetch about it." Baruch Hashem. So you know, the Rebbe with the Ruchnias, but he held so much, you know. He holds so much from us women in our job, in on so many different levels and planes.
And it's funny you were saying folding the socks, because to me, that's like the hardest part of putting away the laundry is folding the socks. I don't know if it's just me, but it's like everything else is like.
What, pairing them?
Always, you know, matching and folding them is always a pain. They all look alike, but they're all different.
Well, it'll never work with kids at home, but I can't wear nylons because I'm allergic to them. So I wear like tall black knee socks. But so I pin them by the toe, and then I just, you know, they're together. I mean, they're mostly all the same, but it just, you know, but it's only one, you know.
One person doing it, right? No. I think at one point I heard that trick, maybe, but yeah, but it's not so many people now in my house. It's not such a big deal. But I definitely still always the last thing that gets put away is the socks. Everything else gets put away sooner. The socks are the last thing.
I think I heard that. I don't remember which one. One of your sons is teaching next year. So
Yeah.
My son-in-law Chaim teaches there. Chaim's husband Chaim.
That's a Bremel. A Bremel's going to
be teaches for Chaim teaches first grade.
A Bremel's going to be teaching second.
Second, right? Okay. So
he's very excited.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So I'm sure Chaim will help anybody if he needs, you know, anything.
I'm sure he'll need some help. So
I'm just, you know.
I'm sure he will. I said, yeah, he's never taught before. So they didn't hire you because you're a teacher. They have no clue if you're a teacher. They didn't hire you because you're a good disciplinarian. They have no clue you're a good disciplinarian. I said they hired you because he was working for a year there as a recess monitor because they see you love kids. And everything else you can teach, but loving kids, you know, you can't teach them.
There's very good classes in
He's
craft.
taking
Good Hamalamdim.
he's taking in the summer. I don't know which ones, but he's taking classes in the summer.
Many years ago,
For this course, he's doing it.
Many years ago, Chaim were here, and Toby and Swilly for Sukkot, and Chaim had wanted to get in touch with Lakey Silver's son from Muncie, who was running a teacher education program at the time. And I took some of Toby's kids to Indian Boundary Park, and guess who showed up there?
Lakey?
Zoe Silver. And so I said, I don't want to interrupt your Cholamite, but my son-in-law's trying to. So talk about Hashgacha Pratis. He might not have had the opportunity, and he's ended up starting late and everything. But it's, really, it was so meant. He loves it. So, Baruch Hashem.
I'm grateful. I'm very grateful to Hashem. Very grateful to Hashem. It's very good for him to have that position. Very grateful. We should always be grateful. That's also good for Branian point. We should look and see all blessings.
It's definitely today a very important shlichus. And I know I have two son-in-laws, so I'm very biased.
No, it is.
And they both do first grade, and I'm very, it's amazing. Yeah.
It is, and I'm grateful for him that he should have such a vehicle to put his energy into and to develop himself through. I'm grateful he has the opportunity, that he's going to be too busy for himself doing good and nurturing children, because that's a beautiful way to develop yourself as a person. So that's why I'm very grateful that he has it. Very grateful. And I think just part of the Hebraian, it's a nice note to end it on, is just the best space we could be in is just being grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Is that our Farbrengen Hachlata, doing more gratitudes?
I don't want to say Hachlata because you said that's not an easy word. I could just say
I don't know if it's not easy, but every Farbrengen should have some resolution that you're working.
I can say for myself that there's
I mean, gratitudes are not, it's not like, taking a commitment of gratitude is using your voice or your words to appreciate what you do have, and I think that's
and really it's the best thing for us. It's the best thing for me, because that's like that's not like a burdensome thing. That's uplifting, and it's uplifting, it's healing, it's centering. And when we do it, I keep journals. I keep my books and books and books and books and books and books and books, journaling all my gratitudes to Hashem. And the more you do it, the more you see He's in your life. And the more you do it, the more He is in your life, because you're opening the door for Him to be in your life. And the more you feel just so blessed, and you see your life with all the blessings, because that's what you focus on, and that's what you think, and that's what you're grateful for. It almost like cocoons you. It puts you in the space of like, wow, my life is so good, because there is so much good that otherwise we forget about, because we can be stressed over this and worried over this and disappointed over this. And when we're in that space of like constantly remembering all that we have to be grateful for, all the blessings, all the good, and it's like, I've got a great life. And then when you walk around feeling that, you walk around loving God, because you see how much God loves you. And the more you feel how much God loves you, the more you love God. And you walk around feeling so protected and so nurtured and so taken care of. So you're happy. So you smile. So you feel good. And then you can handle whatever comes your way, because you're cocooned, because you know it's going to work out, because it always does, because God always takes care of us. So that is a wonderful takeaway. If you wanted that specific thing, I think that's such a practical tool of loving God, of feeling close to God, of feeling happy, of feeling taken care of having a great day. It's just like It's just this generic, amazing tool when we just stop every day, for some of us multiple times a day, and just remember how much God is helping us in our life in very, very, very specific detail.
Also about seeing the divine providence in things also, the hashgacha pratis that happens is another.
It just reminds you of how it's all God. It's all
Right,
Him. It's all
right.
Him. It's all Him.
Right, right, right.
And, you know, all the time learning Tanya, it really helps with that,
It
you
does.
know?
It does.
Ain't Lovato, there's nothing but Hashem, right? Just realize that.
That when you learn, the more you learn, and the more you learn, and the more you learn, and the more you learn, it gets a little more real each time.
Right,
Hashem, God becomes more real each time. You believe in God, but to that degree. But each time you learn, it becomes to that degree, to that degree, to that degree. It becomes so palpable. God.
embedded in your soul, it just gets embedded.
Absolutely. And then we look at the world, and the world is a much safer place. It's not a scary place, because nowadays, if I say, at least for me, if I lived in this world without that awareness that it's all God and everything's God, it'd be a terrifying world. You know, the world is like crazy, scary. But I don't feel any of that, because I look at the world and I know it's all Him. And whatever's happening is exactly what He wants to happen. And He's masterminding it all. It's all part of His plans. It's all some part of bringing the redemption. So it's not scary. It's just, it's happening. It's like I felt with my ship. He's going to be fine. God wouldn't do anything wrong. God's not going to do anything to mess him over. This is part of the process. He's going to be fine.
I did have something that happened that was hashgacha pratis today that was really very empowering, and I could share it. It was I took Kinda to this beautiful park near Old Orchard. It has little waterfalls, and we davened, and it was a beautiful place to be quiet, like a quiet one without all the camps and everything. But anyway, as I was putting my things away, I just looked at my car. Do I have anything from Ipsium? And I had like a couple packets put together quickly, and I took it and I said, okay, we'll see. Because I really wanted to connect with the for Yud Beis Tammuz. I wanted to connect and do something. So before we left, I saw someone walking by with sunglasses, and you couldn't see them very well, but I just asked if she was Jewish, and it was like her reaction was like the shock that you could not believe. She was like ultimate shock. She started telling me her whole story, but she's involved, I guess, with Reformed, whatever, because her son became Reformed, whatever, it's a story. Her story is a story, but she was just there in the park singing to herself Shema that she does in her synagogue. She was singing it, and then, of course, she walked by me as she wasn't singing, but she couldn't imagine like how I could realize that she was just praying. Like it was just like that moment of connection by hashgacha pratis, that she's the one person that I saw that she was just connecting to God in that moment. And it was just such divine providence that that's the one person that He brought me to give the nashek to, the candles. So it was just so
That's
beautiful.
amazing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful for her. It was beautiful for you. It was beautiful for Hinda.
Yeah, Hinda was very patient. She was very patient as I was talking to this. She even commented how patient she was, so that was very impressive. But it was just such a beautiful moment of like just the hashgacha pratis, like something I wouldn't do if the Rebbe didn't instruct us that this is what we should do. And just kind of went out of my comfort zone and was connecting with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was choosing, like, this is the neshama that needs to be connected to. But it was just a beautiful moment, and it's divine providence that that's who I was brought to at that moment. But anyway, just sharing
That's
that.
very cool.
That's so
You
beautiful.
opened up the new Neshek season for me. I carry in my purse all the time, but with this whole crazy COVID business, I didn't think to do it, to approach people really.
Last week I was in Walmart getting Shnerzalman ready for camp. I think it was like Wednesday. I think it was like last week, Wednesday, because he flew Thursday. So it was probably Wednesday. And Shnerzalman and I were the only people in the store without masks. And Sunday, I went back to Walmart again. I never shop, but I went back to Walmart again because I had to get Moshe ready for camp because he was flying Monday. And I would say about 25% of the people didn't have masks, including a number of the workers. So I said, if the workers don't have masks, that means Walmart really is officially allowing it, because if you're a worker
Well,
there.
the city is officially allowing it.
But
It's just,
even then, the stores were saying, even if it's officially allowed, we can still say no.
all right.
Because
Right.
they were saying we could say no because we want everyone to feel safe, whatever they were saying. So but
I was just going to
from
say,
Wednesday to Sunday, like suddenly 25% of the people in the store and workers weren't wearing masks. So yeah, you could give people neshek. They're more open.
Well, I would like to say that there's something even more powerful now, because people are craving for human connection from all that time of having no human connection or keeping separate. So when you connect with someone now, they really appreciate just another human being connecting with them. I mean, that's just the feeling that I feel. I don't
You are
know.
so right. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it is so right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so. We had finally on Monday, I had my first in-person class since COVID started. My Monday morning class that had become my Sunday night Zoom became again my Monday morning in person.
Mazel tov.
It was special. It was just a special feeling of like, whoa, we can like we can connect. We can sit around one table. It's very different than over a computer screen. It was a very, very special feeling.
I do have a request. If you do go in person again, can you keep the Zoom going? Because it's very hard for me going out at night.
So that's what I did for the Monday morning class. I did it because, first of all, over Corona, I acquired several out-of-town students, and also students that it was Sunday night, but they work Monday morning. And there is still one person in my class that says she does not feel safe. She will not attend a class unless it's outdoors. So with all three considerations, and I was like, how is this going to work? How am I going to do Zoom and in person? And the night before, Moshe, who is still home and who's very techie savvy in these things, as versus his mother, who's not at all, he was doing all these gadgets in my house. I have this camera and I have this tripod, and I'm like, well, you got to teach me how to do that. Like, you're not going to be here. No, it's okay. But then that camera, the SIM card didn't work, and then we have another camera that the SIM card needs something to stick into my computer. And in the end, I just did Zoom. He said, don't do Zoom, don't do Zoom. I'm like, I know how to do Zoom, and nothing else is working, and everything else I have to buy parts, and you're not going to be here, so you're going to be able to show it to me. And I'm like, how is this going to work? How can I teach in person and do Zoom? And it was fine. I just.
When's he coming home? I need a consultation. He just got there, I know.
Yeah, but it was, so yeah, so I would definitely, I'm going to plan on doing that. When I finally get other classes to agree to go back in person, I will definitely do Zoom as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for bringing.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. I was actually. I'll tell the truth. I was going to go on something else, but I'm really glad I came.
I'm glad you came too.
Glad you came too.
I don't know. I have like this draw. Yossi Paltiel was doing something, because when he was a little boy and I was a mother at the daycare center, he used to come and bring his siblings on Crown Street. So
Are you chef?
Yeah, I do think there's something powerful about a woman's Farbrengen. And
But
it's
then,
nice
yeah, that's
having a
what,
woman's
this was a men's Farbrengen.
Right,
But
right.
I figured, you know, I want to be with the girls tonight. In the end, that won out.
Yeah. All right, well, all right, we're all gonna
Thank you for
have
choosing the
lots,
girls over
lots
the
of,
guys.
so, I mean, I always do my 3 gratitudes. I'm gonna up the gratitudes, and I like the idea of starting to write it. I haven't written it, but that.
Oh,
that
I
keeps it
haven't written
longer.
in years. I'll take
But
that on
I
sometime.
don't know.
Notebook
We'll
right
do
here.
that, but just, it keeps it longer if you have it in writing opposed to just saying it every day, but
It comes down
maybe,
to the physical reality.
yeah.
Concrete. It's part of the physical world when you put something on. That's what the Thermothetic says, the third law. of
Well,
gravity.
even word, remember power of words. Words do create the physical reality too, but there's something to like having it long-term that you could go back and look at
And then
it.
you go
but-
back, if you're feeling a little bit under, you go back and you reread and you
Right.
remind yourself how much God, because you forget the details. How
Right,
that situation and that worked out and that worked out and that worked out and that worked out. And you just feel like so, I keep an additional document, which is what I call my miracles. I keep that on my computer. And whenever I'm really feeling like under, I just read it. I take as long as it takes. And when I finish reading it, or however long I need to read it, I emerge from that feeling so centered, so taken care of.
yeah, those are, I like, I mean, this isn't, it's the commitment of more learning, more davening, more tzedakah. Those things are like commitments that you feel like, oh, did I do it? Did I keep up with it? Or especially the ones that you commit to do with other people. So, you know, I'm going to do this and everyone else is dependent on me. And those are the ones that you feel a lot of pressure. But when your gratitude is only uplifting, it doesn't put a burden, it releases burden. So that,
So
yeah.
nurturing,
Right.
so nurturing. Because you
Yeah.
walk out of it feeling taken care of. That's for me. I feel like, oh, my life is so blessed. He's taking care of everything. Like I literally
Yeah,
felt yesterday.
yeah, no, that's the best. I mean, for me, that's like the best resolution to choose is something that I just
To nurture you and to make you feel
nurture. Right.
and realize, make you feel how much God loves you. And the more we know how much God loves us, the more we know how much we love God.
Right. Okay, well, thank you.
Gudyantiv, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sarah,
Gudyantiv.
Lisa, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
sticking till the end. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Every person's energy is part of what comes out. Even though it's virtual, it's still all of our energies together. It says if there were 10 Jews together and an angel passed by, the 10 Jews could be playing poker. And an angel passed by, the angel will be consumed by the energy of those 10 Jews. So we're not playing poker. So the four of us, our energy is significant.
Yeah,
Because
we're gonna be.
Wow.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks
Good
so
night.
much. Have
Good
a good
night.
week, everybody. Sei gesund.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.